The following program will make you want to grow things and experience new and wonderful dreams about your plants, garden, and garden design. Listener participation is always strongly advised. Good evening and welcome to Down the Garden Path with your hosts, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board, send us an email right now. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of Down the Garden Path, where we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice for your plants, gardens, and landscapes. As landscape designers and gardeners, we think it is important and possible to have great gardens that are low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen. I am Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design. I've been designing beautiful landscapes for homeowners east of Toronto for over a decade. With me across the city is Matthew Dressing. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Joanne, from this side of the city. Good evening, everyone. I am Matthew Dressing, horticulturist and landscape designer, and owner of Natural Affinity Designs. Natural Affinity is a landscape design and garden maintenance firm servicing Toronto and the Eastern GTA. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting, relevant, and helpful topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from each other, from our guests, and from our research, and from the guests that join us here on the show. As always, we welcome your questions via social media and email.
That's right. And we want to thank you, as always, for joining us on Down the Garden Path and the live, especially that you're here and joining us live, which we love. Remember, you can always check out past shows of Down the Garden Path on your favorite podcast app. So if you're new to listening live, we do have a lot of shows on there. So while you're there, please don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new content. And please like and share and leave us a comment. Thank you. We would love that, wouldn't we, Matt?
We would. We always love hearing from from you, your gardening questions, and where you're from. We always love to know where you're from and what zone you're
where
in.
Our listeners are from. We love that.
That's right. And don't forget, and I don't think a lot of, because we haven't had one yet, I don't think a lot of people realize if you have pictures that you'd like to share with us, you can send them to instudio101@gmail.com, and we can see your pictures as well.
That's
so
right.
Don't forget to share.
We did always say, we tried to do a segment where we did design dilemmas, but we didn't get any. So, but if you have one, because now it's spring and now everybody's finally getting out into their garden. It was a beautiful day in the greater Toronto area, or, around the GTA, as we like to call it, yesterday. A little bit cooler again today. But I'm sure everybody was outside doing something, don't you think?
That's right. Yeah, I know I was out on my balcony and I started a few extra seeds. But yeah, the weather that's changed from yesterday to today was absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So
you didn't work yesterday? I thought maybe you were working.
Oh, I did. And it was absolutely a beautiful day to be out in the nursery. We got lots of new fruit trees, lots of different flowering trees and shrubs, evergreens. Product is still definitely flowing in the garden center, as we're sure that we're going to be open shortly.
Yes, do you think it's imminent?
Yeah, we're thinking it's imminent. Imminent. Sorry. We think that it's going to be probably just the week or weekend before the May 2-4 weekend.
Oh, so not, I thought they really want you to be open for this weekend, for Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah, so they're going to skip this weekend for us. And for those who are listeners, and maybe some of the new listeners who are joining us, we're here in the Greater Toronto area of Ontario, Canada. And the Premier of Ontario has just said that we are only allowed to do curbside pickup and online orders type thing. So we're hoping that we're going to be open, but yeah, we're going to definitely miss this weekend. I know he's definitely updating us regularly, so that could change any minute, but we're definitely getting signage up, we're getting arrows down, we're getting everything sorted out so that we can still provide a good experience when you come out to the garden center, because who isn't itching to get outside and get some flowers and get back in the garden?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and are people pretty patient and happy with curbside?
For the most part, yes. They're still pretty patient. They're happy. I think the biggest issue is that everyone, because gardening is so personal, we all have our personal tastes in our plants and our flowers and what things look like. So I think the biggest challenge at the moment is when you go online or you phone in an order and you're looking for that beautiful hydrangea because something's passed away, or you need to replace a yew, or you want a basket of annuals. You know what you're kind of looking for, but you don't get to see it until it comes out in most cases, or at least it is true for our garden center. And unfortunately, you can't really see when there's, like 3 pansy bowls left, for example, and you're hoping for this color or this combination, and you just kind of get what they give you. So there's definitely some challenges, but everybody's pretty patient. Everybody's pretty happy. Some people are happy to let you load their cars. Some people just want to do it themselves, and everyone's still practicing social distancing and face masks and gloves and sanitizing and stuff like that. So for the most part, I think it's a positive experience.
Yes. Yeah. Now, are people lined up? Because normally the garden centers are so busy this time of year. So the volume.
Yeah, the volume is it's still nothing that it would be if we were actually open, clearly. But the online, definitely, there's lots of phone orders and online orders constantly streaming in. We've had a crew of quite a number of people trying to pick everything and get everything ready. And we've only got 6 spots where I am for pickup at the moment, just because of the size of our parking lot. But they're constantly full, and people are starting to get lined up, and it's only increasing the volume day by day. So
wow. So has staffing kind of ramped up to handle that and handle the plant, like watering the plants? So I know we talked a bit about that last week.
We did, and so things are starting to ramp up for sure, because there's still plant orders to be picked, but there's still plants to be maintained. So we're seeing a little bit more staff. We have started hiring a few people. We are trying to get a lot of our staff back, and in a lot of cases, we do get a lot of return staff, which is good because they already know what they're doing, so they can hit the ground running, right?
Yeah.
So we have a couple of new people, but they're really stepping up their game, and they're really, they're really helping us out, and we think they're going to be a great addition to the team. So, but yeah, things are stepping up. And keep that in mind too. If you're going to a garden center, certain things may not look as pristine as you're used to your garden center looking. And we had that issue very briefly, but there, again, just like we were saying, staffing issues, right? The volume, depending on what your garden center is doing or what they're carrying, they may not have the people, given the circumstances, to be picking your order, as well as, watering and maintaining the plants to the level that most garden centers are generally doing. So their odd thing might come out that's not 100%, might need a little extra deadheading, or is just on the edge of being dry, but everything will come back, and they're doing the best they can. So yeah, most everyone's pretty patient, pretty easygoing, and just happy that we're all safe and they can get out of the house and do something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's great that I know people are happy. I know everybody's happy that they were able to get their annual baskets. And it is hard because I think people love going to the nursery, not only to get the stuff on their to-do list or their checklist, but they love wandering and love the ambiance and stuff like that. And so that's the part that I know is a little bit more challenging, right?
Most certainly. I think that garden centers especially are just one of those ways people use to connect with nature and see things growing and kind of feel really a part of that cycle and that connection to the nature around them. For sure. That's definitely being missed. And a few of the people that I've helped out so far have definitely mentioned that they just miss being in there and talking to knowledgeable staff, but being surrounded by the plants and the color and the smell of the soil and the leaves, for sure.
Wow.
So hopefully, everyone, we can get out into our gardens soon. Hopefully, things are going to get better. But, staying safe and social distancing and keeping each other healthy and safe, that's the main thing, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the most important thing. I think that everybody's doing that. I know, I think that is the most important thing. And making sure that the garden centers are ready to handle those types of procedures, right, as they roll those out?
Yes, exactly. Right. Making sure that they're all ready to go, because most of the time, people have probably just been watering or being ready, thinking that it might just reopen. So, people are still prepping. I know we're just getting ready. We're still figuring things out. So just being patient and grateful that you can go is what we really appreciate as well.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. Crazy times.
Yeah. And you said you were out on your balcony, so you were doing some stuff there too?
Yes. And so if you were listening, if you're a longtime listener, we were talking before the Christmas break, what kind of things we were going to try for next year and next spring. And one of the things that I was trying for the spring was garlic in my container out on my balcony. And I totally forget her name. I'm totally blanking. But we had her talking about garlic as one of our past shows, all about garlic. We hadn't done one yet. And I'm sorry, I'm totally going to blank. But yeah, so I decided I was going to try a couple of different varieties of garlic out on my balcony. We were kind of iffy, and so was our guest. But I do have some returning. I do have some garlic returning. And it's actually on the colder side of the pot. So I'm out spacing southeast. The south side of the pot, maybe it was just the fluctuations and the warming and the cooling, but that garlic did not survive. And the pot that was on the northeast side, or the northwest side, of the pot that was pretty much cold all the time, that's the side of the pot where the garlic's actually starting to come up and is getting bigger. So I think I've got some elephant garlic that survived, as well as a variety called Mohawk, as well as some Russian Red. That was my other one, was Russian Red. So that's my exciting thing right now. I still haven't gotten any annuals or anything. Just finished cleaning up the balcony, and but the garlic looks like it's coming strong.
Well, that is good. That is very good.
So that's my excitement. How about? Go ahead.
No, how about me? I'm good.
Exactly.
It was definitely nice. I've actually been a little on the swamp side with designs, but I really wanted to, get out in my garden yesterday. But I've been nursing the shoulder and arm injury as well. So I was really careful. I have to say, I was really, used my little wrist brace, and I put a pillow down, like a pad on the ground. So I kneeled and was, putting the cuttings. I was basically deadheading some of my little quick fire and my Annabelle hydrangeas, and, kind of putting them in a pot. And then I would dump them in the big paper, because honest to God, those paper bags are so frustrating when you're trying to, they're falling over and flopping and stuff. So I had a little system down. I certainly didn't try to do all of my stuff. So I concentrated on two little areas, and made a bit of progress. It's nice to see out there and see everything that's coming back and that type of thing. And I remember I planted bulbs. I talked about that in the fall, about how when I planted daffodils and crocuses and alliums. So still a little early. The alliums are just leafing up. But the daffodils, I really didn't plant that many of them. And I kind of concentrated them in one garden. But boy, with this cool weather, they were just happy. So that's been kind of cool. And
nice.
the squirrels definitely ate all my crocuses, so I won't be doing that again. But yeah, so no, it's good to kind of make progress. And some things are still late, like the leafing out. Japanese maple, my beech tree still has the leaves from last season on it. So it is. We really are having an unusual May in a lot of ways.
We are indeed. Yeah, it's very cold and it's very warm and it's very wet and it's very dry and warm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad that the bulbs were successful for you.
Yeah.
Maybe post some of the pictures of those beautiful daffodils.
I will. And I actually have, because I don't know if I mentioned before, I don't have a sidewalk on my side of the yard. But on my side in front of my house, but across the street. So I've had people come, when I've been out there walking past going, "Oh, I love your daffodils." So that's been nice, a bright spot for sure.
Most
for sure.
good.
Yeah. So it's definitely a new month for us, isn't it?
That's right. And I think just before we want to segue, I think we've got some guest questions.
Already? Oh, my goodness.
So May is starting with a bang and everyone's getting excited.
Okay.
So let's go to the questions. We've got Dawn's written in, and Dawn says, "Hello, may I ask what type of fertilizer should we put down on our lawns right now?" And it wouldn't be May or another show if we didn't have a lawn question. So thank you, Dawn. But definitely, it is time to fertilize your lawn. But you do want something that is specific to spring or summer, and they're usually something with a high first number, a high nitrogen. So you could see something like a 32018 or a 3200. Something with that first number wants to be high for spring and summer. And as long as your lawn is greening and starting to grow, the plants are actively feeding, and it's definitely time to get your spring fertilizer down. Yeah, and it's a good question too, because depending on where you are, it could be still fairly cold and you're just going to wait. I know we've had it where we haven't been fertilizing till about mid to end of May, but definitely now, especially here in the GTA, you're definitely good to go.
Okay. And I often say that, I've had my neighbors too ask me what type of fertilizer, and I'm like, the kind that they're going to sell you right now. But sometimes I know that means that people have, maybe a couple different varieties in their garage, right? Or in their shed or something like that. And they want to know which one to put on. So I think it's always really good information, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. No, and that's a great question. If you've got some left over, you can still definitely use it, just as long as it didn't get wet and it's kind of all melted together and it stayed dry. It should be perfectly fine, for sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. What else do we have?
Question. Gail has written in. Gail writes in, "Hello, Joanne and Matt. So good to hear your voices on the air tonight. A treat for all of us green thumbs. Please stay healthy." Gail from South Valley, New Mexico.
Thank you, Gail.
Yeah, thank you, Gail, and thanks for letting us know you're from New Mexico. We love to know where everybody is from. I hope you guys you're still staying healthy and enjoying the show, and you hope you enjoy the information we have for you tonight, and that everything is nice and green for you. So thank you, Gail. And lastly, before we kick off our new month, Helga's written in, "Hey everyone, love the show. What can we plant now in reference to flowers or annuals? Something colorful, semi-sun. Thank you." I think, Helga, it's going to go to whereabouts are you? So are you here in the GTA already or with us, sorry? Or are you further south with Gail? Are you a little colder? Are you in a zone 3? But right now, what you're mostly going to find are things like your primula, your ranunculus, your pansies, your violas, some snapdragons, things like that are going to be more cooler season. So they can take that little bit of that fluctuation, those cooler nights, and the days that are kind of semi-cold and blustery that are, at 8 to 10 degrees, at least. And that's what we have available here, usually for us in the GTA, some ivies, some alyssums, perhaps as well. Most of the stuff, too, that is cool season that you're going to find now, Helga, is also what they call like a deciduous sun. So it's going to be stuff that for cool season, it's not going to tolerate the heat and the sun as we go through in the warmer parts of the season. So what you get now would do well in a semi-shade where they can stay cooler during the hotter times of the year, but still get enough sun to flower and bloom and do their thing. So I hope that answers your question. Please feel free. You can write us again at instudio101 at gmail.com. And maybe you can let us know what zone you're in or where you're from.
Perfect.
And just as this is going to be like a listener question as we kick off May, just before we start, Jason quickly writes in, hi, my family and I are listening to you here in Las Vegas, Nevada. We love the advice and information that you give on your radio show each week when we can listen in, which has been every week lately. Stay healthy. Well, thank you, Jason, and everybody, all of Jason's family. Thanks for tuning in. And I think we're going to have a really great show, some information for you tonight. So I hope you guys enjoy. And why don't we kick that off?
Sure, let's do it.
Let's do it. So if you're a regular listener, you know that with every new month in 2020 comes a brand new topic here on Down the Garden Path. And this month, Joanne and I are going to talk about gardening beyond the basics. So we're going to try to up your gardening game a level or two. So from creating a low maintenance garden and or a straw bale garden to creating unusual container combinations using maybe plants you didn't really take into consideration in the first place, to discovering wonderful new plants for your landscapes. Tonight, we're going to begin our month-long discussion about taking your garden to the next level with building a low maintenance garden. So if you have some questions, maybe you have an area you need to lower the maintenance in and want to join the conversation, you can definitely do so. We love to hear from you. It's instudio101 at gmail.com. And don't forget, you can send us pictures of your low maintenance areas as well.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And if we don't get to them in this show, we can always get them next week, right?
That's right. And if you perhaps you're listening to this in your car on your favorite podcast app, you can also tune into at Down the Garden Path podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and we can talk to you there as well.
That's right.
So I think opening, we always talk about helping create a low maintenance garden.
We do. We always mention that, don't we?
We always do. And I know that you have a great group of list of tips and tricks and advice from all your design experience that maybe we can dive into and take our listeners' gardens to the next level.
That's right. That's right. I always say that everybody, when they call me, there's always like that wish list, where they're like, oh, my patio needs to be bigger, or this needs to be leveled out, or I need to retain, or I need to deal with that wet spot. But they always say, but I also want a garden, and I want it to be all season, look good all seasons, and I want it to be low maintenance. And so, and I always joke, oh, I've never heard that before. But really, yes, I have a few tips that I'd like to, that I often, explain to my clients and explain to anybody who will listen usually, right? So I think there's a lot of things that go into a low maintenance garden, and I've got a few ideas. So I'll start with my first one, which is always a little counterintuitive. And that is that it is actually better to make the garden larger, or larger gardens are better than smaller gardens. And I'll explain, because I think a lot of the maintenance, and I'm sure there's lots of people who agree with me, when you're out in your garden, what are you doing when you're thinking of a lot of maintenance? You're cutting it back and you're digging stuff out because it's overgrowing the edge, or it's getting too wide and you can't walk past, or all the plants are too close together, so you're having to cut them back. It's a ton of maintenance when it's in when there's a lot of plants in a small space, even a few plants in a small space, right? So I like to, there's so many new dwarf varieties of plants. And so when you look at the tag before you're planting them and you see what they're going to be, not what they look like now, what they're going to be, it is better to have a 6 foot deep, even your front bed. A lot of people will say, oh, I don't want that to be very deep, 3 feet is enough. But no plants really stay just 3 feet, right? They all overhang a little bit. They surpass that. So I find that it's just better to plan out something bigger and then plan your plants accordingly, so having a 6 foot bed and then having, a shrub that's going to maximize at 4 feet with something that's a perennial that's going to be 2 feet in front of it. So there you go. So those plants at maturity, certainly not when you plant them, certainly not the next year. Usually it's about 3 years, right, before things really fill in to their maximum growth. So your bed, so you really are cutting down on maintenance. Don't you agree, Matt? Like, you're really not having to worry about keeping that shrub a certain size or perennial or tree, because the garden is made for the size it's going to be.
You got it. And you're totally right. Most people think, why, that's so counterintuitive. Or they start to worry that, well, it's so much space to look after. Yeah. But just like you said, thinking about the plants at maturity, remember, plants are organisms too, and they will compete, whether they're pretty or they're weeds. They compete with each other for nutrients. They're designed to fill their space and take up that space and outcompete things. So by letting them grow to maturity, and you're looking at the mature sizes of everything that you're putting in there, as much as that looks like extra space, that's really going to fill in, and the plants are going to do what they're designed to do, is grow, be strong, healthy, and fight for that space. They're not going to let others fill in that space when they're at maturity. When you buy that nice 5x5 hydrangea, she's going to shade out everybody else who wants to grow underneath it. Trees to do this by design, right? If you go into the forest, depending on where you are in the world, there's a leaf layer. They're big. They're filling in. They're canopy to canopy, and not much likes to grow underneath that dense shade, and the trees are out competing them. So by creating this bigger garden, you can let the plants do that the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might have the first year, a lot of space. I often have in a lot of my portfolios where I show people like first year planting, or like right after planting, year 1 and year 3. So they get the visual that, year 1, things will be a little spacious, and you could add some annuals if you'd like, or I like adding some annuals in pots and containers, just to fill that space temporarily. But it's always amazing how quickly the garden grows in. And I, have client after client tell me, like, wow, what a difference that makes in their maintenance.
Right. So, making it bigger, if you really think about it, again, that maturity and letting it grow in, the most maintenance you should really have it in a design like that with the proper bed spacing is in the beginning, with just what might volunteer in between the plants before they fill in. Right?
And a little bit of watering, I think, until they're established, right? A little bit of watering until they're established. Yeah, for sure. And the other reason I want to also talk about the size of the garden. Step back and look at your house from the street, and look at your house from, the driveway. And because sometimes I find this a lot, where a lot of people have really tall, like now is a big time where people even have skinny homes, but they're really tall and narrow. So I think that's another reason, is you've really got to make that garden, if you really want the garden to be impactful and low maintenance, you also have to consider the scale, right, of looking up and see how tall that, just having a little 2 foot bed in front you know, and I've seen some, actually it keeps popping up where I'm seeing homes where they obviously paid for somebody to put in a really narrow garden, and literally the only thing they have in them are rocks. Because I think over the years, they've realized that nothing really grows in there. And so they paid money to have raised beds made, you know, garden walls made, and now they can't grow anything. And I know the contractors will say, well, the homeowner asked me to make it that big. But, you know, that's my bone of contention of like, that's when we need to educate the homeowners that nothing's really going to grow, and that stays. So anyway, we could do a whole show on that one. So I know. So I hope our listeners understand. Any questions?
And just as we switch, John writes in, tell them to plant plastic flowers, or tell them then to get plastic flowers. But, and then also, Kyle writes in, I would never have thought to make the garden larger. Wow, who would have thought that? I'm going to try that. Thank you.
Yeah, don't be afraid of that. I mean, it really does make a big difference, and you'll be shocked at how much easier it is, because the plants are just, you're not working at keeping them a certain size. They're flat, and because also the thing that goes in that, again, we can make this the whole show, Matt, is that then because people are cutting them to keep it smaller, they usually, you know, maybe half the time cut them at the wrong time. So then they're calling us to say, why isn't it blooming? Why didn't my lilac bloom? Why didn't the hydrangeas bloom this year? And, you know, so I think by avoiding having to do a ton of trimming, aside from some spring deadheading, and because your garden is the right size, you really will cut down on a lot of headaches. So, yeah.
Excellent.
So my other favorite topic that we could also do a whole other show on is, and this is for people, I know some people that are getting busier, like their lifestyles change, maybe they're getting older, or they want to travel more and don't want to spend so much time in the garden. So I really love, as much as I love perennials, I tend to design more with dwarf shrubs. Dwarf shrubs, it's always a fun word, have come a long way. So there are a lot of shrubs that do stay 3 feet, 4 feet, 2.5 feet, there's a few of those. And so I would suggest to people that are wanting a low maintenance garden to maybe consider those shrubs, dwarf shrubs, instead of perennials. Perennials, as much as they do come back every year, they do still need a little bit of more TLC, right? Some deadheading, dividing after a few years, staking if they're a little floppy, and they tend to also be, some like rabbits eat those, there's a few other issues, right, that we're fending off. So I find moving to things like Bobo hydrangea or little quickfire, little lime hydrangeas, right, that stay 3 feet. There's a whole bunch of woodgelias that stay between 4 and 5 feet. I know often if I talk to a more mature gardener and I mention woodgelia, their eyes just roll because they're just so familiar with the old, same with nine barks, right? They're all familiar with those old ones that get big and woody and that type of thing. But really, there's a lot of new varieties, repeat bloomers, proven winners, Sonic Bloom, the dwarf lilac, the bloomerang lilac that repeat blooms, mind you, mildly, but it still does, right? It's still cool to see lilac flowers in September and October, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where you can speak to someone at the garden center and definitely do your research on the tags, to see which are because there are still shrubs that do get very large. So you really want to make sure you're choosing smaller varieties. But that is a great way to cut down on maintenance. Also, you're not having to divide them. You're not having to, water them as much or fertilize them. They really, again, will, once they're established, just need a little bit of spring deadheading and away they go.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're dead on. Talk to your garden center people. They get lists of brand new trees and shrubs that are just getting smaller and smaller. Like what you just said, the woodgelia, for example, Sonic Bloom is a double bloomer. And now you've got things like My Monet, which is like 18 inches by 18 inches, beautiful color foliage, which is unusual for the woodgelias, but nice and tight and small and compact. So there's lots of excellent choices. That's
right. So that's my next tip. Another thing is, as far as maintenance goes, okay, we've got our nice large garden, and we're going to choose dwarf shrubs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we go out and get 15 different kinds of dwarf shrub, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
So another thing to keep, again, not everybody has that much space. I realize that, but stick to repetition. So find 3 shrubs that you love and you plant, and, maybe there's a 2 5-footers and some 3-footers and a 2-footer. So now you're going to kind of group them. And so you're only really, and even if this is even throughout your yard, I like that. I like repeating, some of the collections of plants in the front yard and then repeating them in the backyard as well. Because once you know how to take care of those 5 plants, let's say that's your plant palette, maybe with a few exceptions, but that's your primary plant palette, then your maintenance is much easier because you know how those plants behave, right? Versus trying to figure out how 15 different plants maybe behave. So
yes, exactly.
That is, it's one of my favorite trends. I wish we could share video because I do have some, groupings, and you'll see that in a lot of commercial plantings. You see that at a lot of botanical gardens or public gardens, right? Where and the impact is huge.
Yes. I often think about nature too, right? She doesn't have one of every possible plant everywhere. Usually you see established groups of species where there's multiples in that area, right? Where you see swaths of goldenrod or a group of tree species or a certain wild perennial. There's not just one here and there and like 50 different ones. They've grown in and they've naturally repeated themselves. And they make the landscape, when you step back and take a bigger picture of it, look complete and harmonized and all connected together, like there was purpose.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I think they have bigger impact, and especially since you're going with smaller plants, then they'll have bigger impact. Like one Concord barberry that's, like bosswood size, that's got a beautiful burgundy foliage. One of those in the garden looks nice, but 3 of them really looks nice, really makes a statement, and you really get that, you can repeat that and then have maybe 2 Weigelias, wine and roses or electric love Weigelias in the other end that tie the burgundy. So, you kind of have that repetition of burgundy. So you can think of that as far as repetition as well, in the sense of the same plant in larger quantities, but also know to repeat the color, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So if you do like to have a few different species of plants, you like that purple leafed Weigelia and then your barberry, you can have a little bit more variety, right? But repeating through color. Yeah. Excellent.
That's right. That's right. So that is my next tip. And my other favorite is a little trick, a little secret is using hedges strategically. So I kind of have my garden kind of edged with it. So that and I always joke when I explain this to my clients that, so if there's weeds in there, nobody can see them, right? From across the street or from the sidewalk, there's always, so I myself love dense yews. So most of my gardens closer to my house, the foundation plantings are edged in a low dense hedge. You could use boxwood, so that's 4 seasons. So there's your seasonal garden addition. In that all 4 seasons, you've got a nice green edge to the garden. So the shrubs and the trees that are in the garden, there might be some weeds or some plants that don't do well or something going on, but you are only seeing that because you're in your yard. But from a distance, you kind of have that neat green line. And I find it, even if the shrubs, sometimes people don't like the shrubs looking too messy, right? That gives you a nice little edge to them. The other way I like to use hedges is actually at the back of the garden and like against the house or against the fence, because then that provides a nice green line, a green background, right? So I always say it's like paint on the wall, and the plants look much better in front of that green than they do in front of the brick.
Yeah, that gray foundation or that bricking that just kind of ends there. Yeah. No, excellent tip.
Yeah. So what do you think? What's your favorite hedge?
Ooh, favorite probably a nice boxwood hedge. It's probably just so classic and so clean. Yeah, I think just a boxwood hedge, something about it does to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be evergreen either. I mean, I think you could do like a deciduous, I've got a picture here. I'm showing Matt, the wine and roses, Wigelia, or this looks like midnight wine. Like it's a low burgundy, so it would be there in the winter, but still kind of makes a nice burgundy line in front of the hydrangeas or that are behind it.
Yes. Yeah. Again, it adds contrast and depth, but creates that nice line and that visual appeal. Certainly.
Even ornamental grasses. Between my neighbor and I, he planted before I moved in. Even we just have like a 2.5, 3 foot strip between our two driveways, and he did a whole hedge of. Now they're a hedge because they've all kind of grown in together. But he did ornamental grasses, and it really does look nice, and it is pretty low maintenance. So, and it looks simple. It's one plant,
Yes, exactly. It's simple, it's elegant, it's clean. And that's a great point too, the ornamental grasses. And that's actually, as you bring that up, another one of my favorite kind of hedges or bordering, just something like the Elijah blue fescue, just all nice and lined up with that sharp blue space, nice and drought tolerant. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. And this is a picture that I'm missing my large blue spruce, but we often get a lot of questions. People might buy a house or have a house that had, one of those 30-year-old blue spruces on their lawn, and they are so preoccupied and they've spent so much money and time and effort trying to plant underneath this blue spruce, which is really an impossibility. I basically extended the garden in front, came out 5 feet, 5.5 feet or so in front of the blue spruce, or any large, it doesn't have to be blue, any large evergreen, and created a garden in front of it. So mine got, a little bit closer to the road, but I ended up edging that half perimeter of my large blue spruce with rose glow barberry. And so I kind of did, they were itty bitty when I first planted them. So, but now they're about 4 feet tall and they really frame that tree. And I have to say they were a blessing because I know longtime listeners might know that 2 years ago, I lost that tree in a windstorm in May. So, that big empty spot sat there all summer. But it didn't look as empty because I already had an established, 3.5 foot hedge that kind of, was there. And so there's a lot of reasons and there's a lot of places where you might not think about it. And I think it goes with that whole repetition, right? Just planting a larger group of something for screening, for impact, for color, for function. Hedges can really go a long way in a garden.
Agreed. And I know our listeners can't see it, but that hedge just cleans up the edge of that blue spruce so perfectly. It's a great tip for those who just don't know what to do with underneath that dead root mass underneath the tree. And it makes your yard look bigger. It makes it look like it's incorporated a whole other outdoor room. So it really finishes off the garden quite nicely.
It does. Yeah, it really does. And I think a lot of, I'm finding a lot of people that are doing more of, let's say, more of a modern design or more have a more of an architectural house. And they tend to want the repetition and the less plants and the things with this line garden. And really it's just a series of hedges, right?
Joanne, sorry, I'm just going to jump in. You kind of distorted there on the phone.
Oh, did I?
What were you just saying about the clients, how they want that certain type of those lines and maintenance?
They'd like so if your architecture leans towards a bit more modern, or maybe your personal taste is a bit more modern, then I think hedges work there too, but there might not necessarily be the typical hedge, right? Like you can do ornamental grasses at the back and then, maybe a row of 5 of those, and then 5 hydrangeas in front, and then in front of them 5 barberries, so they're groupings and they're repetition, but they're also really kind of like, that's 3 hedges, really.
Right, layering different hedges, those different lines and different groupings create depth and contrast of color and texture and season.
Yeah, how's that sound? Is better?
Yes, that was all perfect. That's an excellent thought, a nice way to use hedges in your modern feel.
That's right.
Outside of a traditional way.
Mm-hmm. So yes, we'd love your questions. If there's anybody who has a question on how to make their garden a little bit more low maintenance.
That's right. You can write us here at instudio101 at gmail.com. And actually, just as you say that, Mary Jones has written in. Hi, first-time listener from Campbellton, New Brunswick. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Welcome.
Great idea about enlarging my garden. However, my question for you this evening is that when I dig out the garden to enlarge it by removing more grass, would I now mix anything to the soil where the grass was that I removed? Thank you.
Great question.
Excellent question, because, you are probably taking away a lot of that soil with that lawn or anything else that used to be there. Take a look at just like your native soil. Often people, especially at the garden center, they will just like to use more triple mix, just kind of a nice, well-rounded, well-textured soil with a little bit of nutrients in there to replace that old soil. It's a nice, healthy, well-balanced kind of filler. I like to do that. I also like to recommend a little bit of compost. Soil is alive, and just adding a little bit of compost, even just a triple mix compost blend, 75 to 25 or whatever you feel you like. You're basically just kind of giving that soil just a little bit of a jump start and reintroducing some of those microorganisms that you maybe have taken away that were alive under the grass, and just gives the plants, when you plant it in there, a nice boost. And those organisms will help break apart and restructure any rough or tough areas that you might have in the garden as well. So hopefully that answers your question, Mary. And
that's great. Yeah.
And welcome to the show.
Yes, definitely. And I do want to just go back and say, talking to hedges, I think people primarily think of evergreens, right? Cedars and yews and boxwoods. So I do want to highlight the fact that you really have to pay attention to the tags, because for boxwoods, for instance, they're all created equal. They're different, right? Green velvet versus green gem. So there's those are 2 examples. And I think I've had people that have had the reverse problem where, one, they wanted them to stay 3 feet tall, 3 or maybe a foot tall, right? They wanted a little narrow edging, and they just wanted one that was going to be maybe 2 feet tall. But unfortunately, they bought green velvet, which if you leave it alone, it's going to grow to be 3 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Right. Or I've had people who have planted, bought the green gem, which stays, up 2 feet maybe at maturity, but is a slow grower.
Yep.
And then they planted them, 5 feet apart. And they're like, why isn't my hedge filling in? I'll get those pictures sent to me going, what's wrong? And I'm like, well, you brought the wrong variety. That's not going to get to be the 3 feet, right? So definitely, I think one word of thumb is, if it's on sale, it usually isn't the smaller one, because they take so much longer to grow. That's been my experience anyways. The fast growing ones are the ones that go on sale the most. But same with yews. All yews aren't created equal. I have a picture here that I'll post on our Facebook page that shows, the hedge in front is dense yews, and they just grow about 3 feet. Of course, you're going to trim them a little bit, but they're not meant to be really tall. Where you've got fixed yews that can get a little bit taller for people that need a larger evergreen. So I do want to just give a shout out there for people to just really pay attention to that information. All right. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, great tip. Yes, definitely. Always read the tag, and it just makes me think back. It was, again, just when you're making the garden bigger, right? Just making sure you've got the plants that are going to fill that space and are actually going to be to the maturity that you need to lower your maintenance.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So, and the show is flying by, I do want to mention, so my last one, I thought if we have a few minutes, I would talk about, last but not least, to create a low maintenance garden, ask for help. So wherever you are in the world, maybe, even if you don't want to hire a designer, I know we're both designers, so I'm not needing to be, what's the word, biased also. But, I think sometimes self-promoting, a little bit of that. I think we're a little close. Sometimes when you've got a tricky spot or you've got a dilemma in your garden or you're not sure what to do, ask for help. So whether that is going to your garden center with a photo, more of an in-store designer versus the person watering the plants. No offense.
No, yes, definitely.
A fellow, like if you belong to a garden club, if there is a garden club or a horticultural society in your area, then that's a great thing, reaching out to somebody there and getting some feedback. Or last but not least, I will do self-promotion and consider hiring a garden designer or a landscape designer. I think the problems and the help that they are going to mistakes that they're going to prevent you from making in the short term or in the long term is really going to pay for the money in the short term. So I do want you to think about that. Really consider, especially if you've got a large space, there's a lot of details that go into a garden, so that they'll automatically and easily know what will bloom when, what will look good in what season. Making sure that our season is extended, right? Not just everybody can get a nice June garden, but whose garden's looking good at, the beginning of August, right? Or beginning of September, that type of thing. So there are a lot of, having a professional assessment can really save you a lot down the road. And it can also help you stagger. So maybe your budget is small. Well, this is what you do this year. And then this is how you build on that for next year. So it really can be very beneficial to a tight budget, I think. And a fresh perspective. So I think sometimes I know I had help with my own garden as a landscape designer. I was just too close to it. I wanted this and I wanted that. And, it's hard to make those decisions. So having a professional and fresh perspective can really help you with creating a better low maintenance garden.
Excellent tip.
Yeah, I think so. I hope people understand that and look for somebody close to them or virtually. I know I helped somebody in Texas this past week. I did a garden design for someone in Texas, and that was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
That's it. So no matter where you are, we can help you.
That's right. And if you're doing a larger project, help. There's a lot, just like building a house or decorating the inside of the house, there's a lot of details. So it isn't just where's the garden go and where does the walkway go. Then it's like what stone color of the walkway should I use that matches my house, or, and what kind of lighting should I use, and what kind of,
what kind of light do you have?
What kind of light fixture? Yes.
What kind of soil do you have outside? Can you grow what you think you want to grow?
Right. Yeah.
It's an outdoor living room.
Even rocks, people will they'll say they want a couple of rocks, and I'll put a couple of rocks, but knowing what color rock or what type of rock looks best, so there are a lot of details. And I think people think that that's only necessary if you are doing a large space, but I think a garden designer can really make the most of a small space and have it be bigger impact as well. So, yeah. So there you go. So our gardening beyond the basics, I think that was a jam-packed, I know I'm talking a mile a minute, but so lots of information. And I'm sure one day we'll probably break those into individual shows, right, Matt? But for now, I wanted people this time of year when people are thinking about their gardens or new to gardening or want to revamp their garden to make it more low maintenance, there are some great places to start.
That's right. Mike has written in, fantastic show. He loves the idea of a larger garden. It'll definitely be less grass to cut. Amen, he says. Thank you for that advice. So I think there's lots of information. I think, what great tips. Thank you for bringing them to the show. I hope you guys have all gotten as much out of that information and that presentation as I did the first time I heard Joanne talk about it at a local garden club. It was especially that first point, right? I mean, a lot of people don't really think about that. So I hope that this will take your gardening to the next level, to beyond the basics, as we journey through May.
That's right. That's right. Oh, and I have one more thing.
Oh.
What? Oh, you're looking at me.
One more thing. I wasn't expecting
I know, looking at the time before Gary plays this out, but I do want to give a shout out also at my last kind of a tip, and sometimes it can be the biggest money saver of all, is using a qualified contractor. So I have, when I do this presentation, I have a little meme that goes with it that says, if you think it's expensive to hire a professional, wait until you hire an amateur. So I think that's the most important thing. And I go back to that point where, the contractors gave her a 2 foot deep garden, and there's nothing that will grow in that because there's so much screening and wall and heat from the porch. So hiring someone who's a professional, who's going to tell you what you should be doing. Of course, you want them to listen to you, what you want, but you really want someone who's going to do it properly. And you really want somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yes, exactly. Many thoughts to elaborate on that point pop into my head. Many examples, but definitely you've hit her nail on the head. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's same with planting trees, right? There is a wrong way to do it.
There really is. And a lot more people are planting them wrong than they realize.
Yes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you have another tip?
No, I better stop, right?
We're like right out of time. I think we have enough time just to basically say thank you, for listening. Next week, May the 11th. Oh, sorry.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I thought you did. Sorry, must have been just distortion.
That's okay.
Next week, we're going to talk about container gardening and planting things in containers, taking things to the next level there in color combinations, etc.
And different varieties of plants too. So not your usual thing, right? We want you guys thinking out of the box and thinking beyond the basics.
You got it. You've got it. Exactly. So tune in for that show. We hope you all enjoyed this show quite a bit. There's lots and lots of great information packed in there via Joanne. Thank you very much.
Oh,
and, you can always reach us off the air as well. You can write us here at instudio101@gmail.com. Joanne, we can find you at?
Joanne Shaw. Goodness, Joanne at downtoearth.ca is my email address, or my website is downtoearth.ca. And all my social media are there. So please give me a follow on Instagram. I'm loving Instagram these days, as well as our Facebook group, right? You can search for us on Facebook, Down the Garden Path Podcast on Facebook.
That's right. Same thing on Instagram at Down the Garden Path Podcast. And you can find me at Matthew at naturalaffinitydesigns.ca or naturalaffinitydesigns.ca, and all my social media links there as well. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week to Down the Garden Path. Thank you, Dawn, Gish, Helga, Jason, John, Kyle, Mary, and Mike for tuning in. Thank you, Gary, again, for helping us produce a wonderful show here.
You are welcome.
Bringing it to you live. Thank you, yes. And don't forget to tune in next week. And to all the other wonderful programming here that you can find weekly on realityradio101.com. Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path. We hope you guys have a safe week. Stay safe. And thanks again for tuning in here to Down the Garden Path on Reality Radio 101.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your hosts, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.